Welcome, everyone, to Dev Interrupted. I'm your host, Andrew Ziegler.
And I'm your host, Lloyd Pearson.
This week, we're talking about how the Pentagon is kickstarting their own kind of Y Combinator and looking for the next Palantir on college campuses. And Reddit's lawsuit against Anthropic for data scraping that's hitting the news. And finally, an engineer's reflection on the AI skeptics in his life that gave us both a good chuckle. Ben, what are we cracking into first?
Yeah, let's just start right at the top and talk about what's happening in the defense industry.
So the Pentagon, the defense sector of the US is launching a major initiative to increase software startups that are incubated for the purpose of serving the military. So we're talking about startups that are funded for military purposes and incubated in a very similar way that we see startups for consumer businesses, B2B businesses, maybe historically through things like Y Combinator, right? It's an attempt by the government to modernize internal things on old systems. It's actually a theme we've been covering quite a bit here on Dev Interrupted. We talked recently about changes at the FAA and at airports around updating technology there. So this was a really interesting shift into like a tech-focused world incubated by the defense sector. So Ben, what did you think?
Yeah, and I saw they were offering some like startup investments for like recent grads that were wanting to launch their own company that like supported both the defense and the commercial sector. But I think one thing that's really important to remember whenever stories like this come out is that software engineering as a profession is still pretty young, relatively speaking. You think about like other types of engineering, like civil engineering or architecture or material science, like all these other types of engineering have a much more storied and established history around them. Um, and I've previously brought up like how I would love to see far more public investments into building more robust software foundations for society. And I think we're increasingly heading to a world where software does end up being the ultimate defense in a lot of situations. We're all familiar with the story of how like software has eaten the commercial world, and I think it's going to eat our governance systems as well, just like probably on a slower timeline. And there's been a lot of modernization effort that's happening in the U.S. federal government in the last decade or so. If you are familiar at all with the Air Force, like they went through a really massive digital transformation during the COVID era, that ended up then becoming a model for a lot of other organizations within the Department of Defense. And
Hmm.
I've actually met some of the people who have like started and worked for some of these like more defense oriented startups, and they operate surprisingly similar to like your typical tech company. The same types of people you would see in a Silicon Valley tech company, with the same like approach to building software. So I think that's a great thing. I think this is probably going to be a good investment over the long term, and I hope we see some cool companies come out of it.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities to innovate, update, especially within the government. So I'm interested to see what comes of it.
Yeah.
Related to that, we're talking. You talked a bit about modernizing defense infrastructure. There's like a lot of need for it, right? Well, there was a fun tidbit that came out recently in Japan about how they modernized a part of their own social infrastructure. Maybe that's a fun bit that kind of resonates with your own interests there, Ben, talking about the opportunities in society to improve things. Because when I read this article, all I could get was immediate flashbacks to living in Japan, where I was for 2 years after college. And the dreaded experience of having to order like a movie ticket or a concert ticket or buy furniture from the vending machine in the konbini was always so daunting because putting in my address, which was like 4 sets of numbers and 3 sets of kanji and really complex code, was very hard for me on the machine. But in Japan, they've just launched a digital address system that crunches all of that hard to understand, hard to input information into a simple 7-digit code that folks can use on these types of machines living in Japan to do everyday life things like pay their bills and order concert tickets if you were me in Japan. So this was a fun tidbit that came out. It's a really great effort from a government that typically hasn't done a lot of technological innovation. Japan is actually not really known for having this type of system. So it's really great to see this quality of life improvement for everyone there.
Yeah, and I love how it's just like a low hanging fruit to help people out. And I'm sure both foreigners that are visiting and long term residents, there's probably a lot of value to these types of improvements.
For sure.
Yeah, so let's talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart, and that's Reddit. What's the story that's going on there?
Oh yeah, so Reddit. We all are familiar with the great field of Reddit. So Reddit has built a $2 billion business on user generated content that's categorized by any kind of topic you could think of. It's a treasure trove of information for AI. We've seen this already play out over the last several years of as foundation models have come into existence, wanting to get their hands on Reddit because Reddit has this naturally organized sets of information that are natural communication between people on highly intricate topics. But ultimately, Reddit is a place where that information and data has gathered. It's people's conversations over decades even. And so there's something interesting that has happened where Anthropic apparently has been making a bunch of unauthorized access to Reddit servers to access this information. And this is after a licensing deal fell through, and so Reddit is not getting paid what they think is their fair share. But I think it's interesting because, Reddit hasn't really done anything to make that AI and that information AI ready for consumption. Like there's no cleaning or curating or enrichment that they do on there, and they just hand you all of it, the spam and the bots and the snake eating the tail all in itself. So it didn't really write the content, it didn't enhance it, but now it wants rent from the innovators that want to build on top of it. It's a really interesting evolving play in the power economy.
Yeah, what is model collapse?
I mean,
Uh,
if anything, it would happen through Reddit being trained on Reddit.
yeah, exactly. I've been a Reddit user for well over a decade at this point, and if you're a longtime Reddit user, you may know that it's pretty easy to pile on the hate right now with them because they've kind of made a lot of decisions recently that has upset a lot of their users. But I want to point out something really important, and that is Reddit has been it's probably one of the most astroturfed platforms on the internet. And I think this problem gets worse and worse every single year. So like if you're like me and you've normalized this practice of like turning to Reddit to find advice for like local communities and for niche problems and all of that, which it's historically has been very good, like a very valuable platform for that. I think whenever you do that today, there's a pretty good chance that you're now reading bot generated content because it's been largely unregulated on that platform. But to get back to this story, Reddit, like many other companies, is being disrupted by all of these new AI tools that are coming out. Like think about how there's probably lots of people now that are going to all of these GPT services to ask the types of questions that they might have taken to Reddit in the past. And companies like Reddit may be facing a future where their primary value proposition is all of the data that they have to train those AI models. And, we mentioned model collapse. Like, I suspect with just how much data is on Reddit, or how much bot generated data is on Reddit, that there's always a risk that this data is not as valuable as you might expect, and it could actually end up becoming a liability risk if you are actually facing model collapse because your data isn't good enough. And I think we should follow this story either way. It's all alleged at this point. Like Anthropic denies scraping this stuff outside of the terms of service, so maybe they did
Yeah.
decide that the data just wasn't valuable enough to continue using.
Yeah, I think it'll be an evolving story. So I'll be interested to see how Reddit continues to chase down folks using their data. I'm sure it's not this won't be the last one.
Yeah. Yeah, and the last story we have is a bit of a fun one. It's not really news, it's more of an editorial. So what do we have for this, Andrew?
Yeah, I love this article. We came across it on Hacker News. This is an article from Thomas Potacek. He's an engineer at Fly.io, and he wrote this really candid article about all my AI skeptic friends are nuts, and put out several key arguments in his mind about the skeptics in his life and the arguments that they have against AI and using it in coding, and his personal responses that are grounded in his experience as someone using these tools. I found it to be a really fun reflection because some of this is obvious in terms of like level setting, talking about making sure you're even discussing the same thing going in understanding that it's different using ChatGPT versus using like an agent in your IDE. There's
Yeah.
a lot of like level setting that he does in this article to kind of help folks navigate these conversations if you find yourself constantly starting back at the starting point in skeptic conversations. But also he balances it all throughout with humor. Just the silliness of why would you be against innovation and trying out new things as an engineer and building. So I found this one fun to dig into. I recommend everyone give it a read.
Yeah, and I like to routinely reflect on like where I was about a year and a half ago when I first started really using AI as a part of like my day-to-day work, and just how far the technology has evolved in like that short 18 or so months. Like yeah, there's like a lot of overhyped aspects of AI, like you know, there's all these claims of like artificial general intelligence, AGI, like being around the corner. And you know, those may or may not come soon or ever. You know, it's hard to tell, but whether or not you buy into that hype, you really can't stick your head in the sand and claim that AI is not going to disrupt many aspects of work. Like it's already happening today, and I keep hearing a lot of comparisons in this article as well to what's happening now to like the adoption of the internet and to mobile computing in the past. And I think it's a pretty good comparison because I think the transformation we're going through now mimics those periods in many, many ways. And we're going to come out of this with new paradigms in how we build and consume technology. Like, just think about how different the technology landscape was before everyone had a computer in their pocket and before everyone's computer was connected to this immense data source on the internet.
Yeah.
And, you know, the reality is that like agentic, autonomous workflows are here, and I think now, like today or the next year or so, is the time that these tools are really going to prove exactly how much productivity improvements they're going to create. Like we're kind of in the Wild West right now. Like it's very chaotic. There's just a lot of things going on. I think we're slowly going to come under more and more control over the next couple of years as AI products become a lot more hyper focused on like solving real world problems rather than these like general purpose chatbots that we have today. As much as I love them, like it's only one aspect of where all this is going.
Yeah, exactly. And as kind of AI's involvement in the things that we use, it matures. It's also going to fill into those niches and parts of the process that we haven't seen it really resolve yet. It's going to rise. It's going to lift all of those boats. It's once we can figure out how it's going to actually play with all those parts of a process.
Yep.
So Ben, what's coming up next on the pod?
Yeah, so this week, Dan Lines and myself sit down to continue our discussion about the future of AI driven software development. We're going to dive into a lot of really interesting topics, so make sure you stick around after the break. Hey everyone, welcome to part 2 of our conversation on developer productivity. Once again, I've got Dan Lines here with me in the studio, and if you haven't listened to part 1 of the conversation, we covered the shift from engineering intelligence to developer productivity insights and developer experience. So go check it out if you haven't already, because it's full of great insights that really set the stage for today's conversation, where we're going to be more forward looking and think about how AI is impacting the engineering teams that we talk to every week. So Dan, it's great to have you back for this conversation.
Yeah, awesome to be back. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah. So AI is all over the place. We can't seem to get through a single week anymore that without discussing this in some level on this show. But it's really hard sometimes to see through the hype, to find the actionable success stories. And that's where I wanted to bring you in today, Dan, because we've got some big views here at LinearB about where AI is going. And I want to talk about that. So, you know, everyone's talking about it. Very few people have a concrete plan for the future. What should engineering leaders be doing right now to prepare for AI?
Wow, what a big question,
Yeah,
Ben.
I like to start
Okay.
big.
Yeah, you like to start big. Maybe let's break down where are we all at with AI, where are engineering leaders at
Yeah.
with AI, maybe what's on their mind, so, something like that. So one is, most of the engineering leaders that I'm speaking with, I would say they are dabbling, maybe that's the best, or experimenting
Yeah.
with AI in one form or another, usually they'll say something to me like, I bought some Copilot licenses, maybe for everyone, or maybe for a few teams. And it almost feels, I mean, that's the interesting part. It almost feels like they did that because they felt the pressure to do it so that they could say they're doing something with AI.
I think their developers would revolt if they didn't give them something,
Yes,
in this day and age.
right. But on the flip side of that, it doesn't always fit into like a cohesive strategy, let's
Yeah.
say, of what they're doing with AI or why they're doing it. And maybe and of course there's kind of like an assumption, if I do provide all of my developers and their IDEs, it could be Cursor, it could be something else, like good things will happen.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I think there's a lot of room to understand what the next step is. And then I would also say, just because we purchase a bunch of these licenses and developers are using it in the IDE, it doesn't mean that it's actually having a positive effect on productivity or the business. Now,
Yeah.
the other thing that I see a little bit is, okay, I want to roll out AI maybe everywhere into my SDLC, but I don't know, do I need control around it? I can't actually roll it out. Maybe I just want to put it on a few services. How do I get the visibility into it? Can I write rules around it? And there's kind of like the control aspects of this as well. So there's kind of a lot to unpack here. Where do you want to take it? Where should we take this talk?
I think what we're kind of getting at here is that like AI is clearly having an impact on just about everyone. There is a lot of hype around it, and there are many times where organizations like adopt AI, get very hyped up about it, but don't do it in some sort of like structured, coordinated rollout.
Yeah.
So then it doesn't live up to the expectations. And there's almost like a backlash where everyone becomes like disappointed in AI. And then, suddenly you're fighting like pessimism around adopting it. And often it's tied to like top-down directives as well,
Yeah.
that don't align with the bottoms-up need. So maybe we can start with like how LinearB is approaching this, because I think that's probably where we have sort of a unique perspective on this. And everyone, I think one of the biggest concerns around AI is how do you safely adopt it across your organization? So like maybe we can just start there. Like how can you make sure that the next step you take into AI is going to be done safely?
Yeah. Okay. You need rules around it. I think it's actually pretty simple. So, with LinearB, we have our gitStream technology, and that gitStream technology essentially allows you to programmatically create rules around when AI runs, where it runs, for who does it run, and when, and full monitoring end to end. So usually when you think about control, you might think about policy, rules, programmatic control. And that's what LinearB offers. Now, for example, maybe let's give something more concrete than that. Let's say that you have deployed Cursor or Copilot, and you see more code is being created, more pull requests are being created, and therefore there seems to be a little bit of throughput gain. But now that we have all of this, let's call it gen assisted code, right? You still have a human there, a developer there. Now it's made it to the next step of the SDLC, which is the pull request and the review process and the merge process. And we're stuck a little bit because we have a large amount of code that's now making it there. And it's almost like the pipe was opened on the development side, but the pipes that actually get the code out to production in a controlled and safe way have remained the same width. Now, what LinearB allows you to do is deploy these rules, these policies, and have the control once the pull request is open all the way to merge. And that's doing two things for you. It's actually making kind of that promise of AI and the efficiency come to life. But also you can start saying things like this. For these services that are low risk, and this is all codable within gitStream. For these services that are low risk, I'm actually going to allow an AI review to run. And if everything passes with looks good to me, because, for example, these services, maybe they're more in an incubator state or an experimental state, and I need to just run fast, I'm going to let that LGTM to go through, and then I'm actually going to merge that pull request. That's one rule that I can have. Now, I might, in other services, want much more control than that. I might be in a situation where, okay, the PR is opened, the AI code review is going to run, and what I'm actually going to do with gitStream is still have a human reviewer, of course, but that human reviewer, that developer reviewer, is actually going to be sent all of the information that the LinearB AI code review has already done. And it'll say something like this. Hey, Ben, I did 80% of this review and I feel really good about it. I need you to review this 20%. I still need you to review. Okay, now that's a nice level of control. And a third one, and I've seen this kind of like in an in-between state. Let's say, Ben, you opened up a PR and some of that was aided by Copilot. LinearB is going to have a rule in your service area that says, hey, the AI code review has run, but Ben, since you're a senior developer, you're going to decide now if you're going to bring another developer in to review or not. You have the power. So these are a few, I think, kind of like down-to-earth examples of actually coordinating and controlling where AI is able to run, have more power, have less power, and you can kind of turn the knobs between like efficiency and your level of control.
Yeah, the word control, I think, is going to be the word of the year maybe for 2025. And I think it's like you really think about how the perception of AI, like everyone started with like chat interfaces, predictive typing, like these natural language to code, but that's really only like a tiny portion of the actual like software development process. And I think many orgs still view it in that the first way, but in reality is manifesting more like automated workflows. Like even within the IDE, when you look at how like IDEs like Cursor operate, like everything is becoming like an automated workflow now. So on that thread, like where do you see the future of these like agentic AI workflows heading?
Yeah. I mean, obviously no one can predict the future. So this is just what I'm seeing and maybe giving a hint without fully being able to say it of what LinearB has coming next. But let's say right now we're in the era of code assistant and agents in the IDE, code assistant and agents, like I said, in the PR process and in the deployment process, but there's still developer involvement. And there's still a lot of human control. That's, I think, the era that we're in right now. But quickly, I kind of see two other eras progressing here. The next era would be something like, hey, the agent actually, so your AI agent actually produces all of the code, let's say, and autonomously does the review and makes a decision of whether it can go out to production or not. And maybe in between there's still some developer and human checks and balances, but it's more autonomous end to end. And then maybe after that, again, giving some hints of where LinearB capability set is headed, and it might sound a little bit futuristic, but I think there will be an era where agents are saying something like, hey, Ben, I created a design for you. I created a Jira story for you. I actually created the code for that story. Does it look good to you? I actually am ready to release it for you. So when you're talking about a workflow, I can see us headed to a point where all areas of that, like a SDLC, start being more AI and agent driven end to end. And then the control becomes more important, because now you can start controlling, okay, where do I want it to stop and have a human review, and where am I going to allow it to go on its own to actually like move as fast as possible?
Yeah. And in the past here on Dev Interrupted, we've had some content that shows how a lot of AI adoption can be mapped somewhere between like human produced assets versus AI produced assets, and human managed process versus AI driven process. And I know, just personally speaking, there have been aspects of my personal workflow that I have like 4 or 5x through AI. But again, it's only like one aspect of my workflow, and gradually over time, it feels like more and more aspects, more and more tasks, more and more things that I have to engage with are going to get wrapped into these AI workflows. And at some point, like you really do start to see like these 5 to 10x improvements in specific areas.
Right. And maybe if you're thinking about, again, how to get like 100x improvement or something crazy, or 10x improvement, it's those different aspects of the workflow actually talking to each other, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You can think of, again, like someone from the product side saying, hey, I have a design or I have an idea, all the way out to, okay, an agent has coded that idea and reviewed that idea and felt safe enough to deploy.
Yeah.
I think that's where. What?
Yeah. So this is all very, very future forward thinking, which is really, really great. I love getting to talk about that stuff, but it's also really great to talk about what success is looking like today for organizations. So obviously no one is out there, anyone who's claiming to be 100xing their developers or getting rid of their entire software development team through AI is not telling you, is probably not being honest with you. But we are seeing some improvements. So I know we've been working with some companies that have started to realize some pretty substantial gains from adopting this like automation-driven, metrics like informed approach to developer productivity, developer experience, and adopting AI. So what have we seen so far today?
Yeah, let me just hit you with some concrete numbers that we're seeing from the LinearB community.
Yeah.
On average, after deploying AI and automations with gitStream, we see about a 19% cycle time reduction. That's an average across the customer base. In addition to that, because we have some things that are helping team leaders and managers in the sense of mostly in the iteration flow, like the sprint flow and the retrospective, about 5 hours saved per manager as well every sprint. These are just kind of like hard pieces of data. Now, even more so than that, Ben, I pulled a few examples. I won't say, I guess, the name of the company that we're working with, but more describe. Just 3 that came to mind. One is we have a company that saves 71 days. So 71 days, you can do the math of hours saved. So 71 days of saving just by deploying the gitStream AI code review and the PR summary. If you add up all the minutes of time saved from automating the summary of the PR, time saved from reviewing the PR, doesn't mean a human reviewer can't be involved as well. Okay, that's a control part. Add that all up, you get a 71 days saving.
And that's 71 days across. How long of a time?
Okay, so that's going to be over, let me just check the data here. That's going to be within a 6-month time period for this example.
Yeah, I love the real-time data analysis.
Yeah. I have it up here running live. Now, I have another customer that saved 41 days of work with gitStream, and they've done this It's more so on safely merging 2,500 pull requests that were created by bots. So you think about like a Renovate bot, a Dependa bot. Think about bot created work, 2,500 PRs that have been merged without human review. Okay. Now that's coming within a 5-month period of time.
Yeah, I mean, even
So these
even
are
if
more-
it only takes you 30 seconds to click those the green buttons to merge that, I mean, you still have to imagine the time savings from that.
Yeah, so you get, even if it's taking you 31 seconds, but you're also removing yourself from what you were doing,
Yeah,
doing that,
right.
merged, and having to come back to what you're doing
Yeah,
as
it's like,
well.
let
So
me
you
put
can
the
kind
time
of
on
put
my
the-
calendar every week to click green buttons for
Right. And so that's with the gitStream safe merge. And the last one that I have here is I have another company that's combining those two use cases. So I have one where they've rolled out the gitStream AI code review, they've rolled out the gitStream AI PR summary, and then they've rolled out the safe merging rules. And again, the safe merging rules means you have to pass the criteria, the AI review has to pass, the test has to pass, it has to be in a low risk area. And they were able to save 75 days of work in that same time period. So when we think about kind of like some hardcore stats or what it means to be successful, and we said this in part 1 of the episode as well, it's like how many days or how many hours of work have you returned back to the engineering
exactly.
organization or returned back to a developer, and they can decide what to do with that time. That's what success looks like.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to mention, if you didn't watch the first half of this interview, this is a great moment again to remind you, go back and watch it. We cover how, you can look at DevX investments and convince your engineering leadership that it did have a positive impact on your organization, and show and demonstrate how it drives the business forward. So just to wrap things up, I want to get a little practical with just a couple of, maybe there's some short answer questions, but who knows? Maybe you got a lot to say about
Okay.
it. So yeah, question number 1, what is one habit that every engineering team should start tomorrow?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's a good question. And actually, you know what? The answer to this question, and it kind of shows how fast the world is moving, the answer to this question has changed for me over the last 8 months, 6 months, something like that.
Oh, interesting.
The one habit that I would say is each week, I would say pick one task that you're going to remove from a developer's plate, probably with AI or an automation. See if you can quantify the time returned if you would remove that task, and take an action to remove it. If you did that every week or every month, you're going to get to the end of the year and be in a good state.
Yeah, very, very well put. I know my team has started to do something similar, and it's amazing how quickly those one tasks add up over time. So second question, what do you think is the biggest misconception about productivity?
I would probably say the biggest misconception, and you can even say maybe it's coming from some of the stuff in the news of like, you can see like Elon Musk saying, hey, my teams work like 100 hours a week and all this. I think the biggest misconception is productivity gain is associated to developers working more hours, working the weekend, staying up all night, that type of stuff. And it can be then perceived as a negative connotation, because that's not a smart way, working a ton of hours.
Yeah.
So as opposed to what we said in the previous answer of productivity gain being associated to the removal of tasks off of people's plates and how often you're able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. What if instead of having your developers work weekends, you have their AI agents doing work for them over the weekends?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Third question. What is the biggest mistake that engineering leaders make when or just generally, what is the biggest mistake that engineering leaders make today, and what can they do to fix it?
Yeah, I mean, probably in this pod, I have like we have gitStream, we have automations, we have AI. That's like the context that I'm answering this question in. But I would
Mhm.
say the biggest, I don't know if it's a mistake, but the biggest thing that I see is lack of a strategic plan to roll out AI and automations to each area of the SDLC,
Yeah.
as opposed to just purchasing Copilot and being like,
Mhm.
that's what I did. And it's like, okay, well, you're not going to get the productivity gain there, or you're not going to get the outcome that I think you're looking for,
Yeah.
as opposed to saying, okay, let me take a holistic view. Now I understand where all my bottlenecks are. I have a plan for rolling out to each stage to the SDLC that then adds up to the outcome that I probably promised, like either promised the CTO or the CEO or the board.
Yeah. Yeah, we've covered this actually quite a bit on Dev Interrupted already, how organizations who are, there's been a lot of research on this, as a matter of fact. Organizations who adopt AI without some sort of coordinated and structured plan see a fraction of the benefits that organizations who do. So it's definitely critical. So, all right, just one last question and then I'll let you go. So, what's next for LinearB, and what is LinearB doing to help engineering organizations stay ahead of the curve?
Yeah, listen, I mean, every customer that's using LinearB today, they're providing hours back to their organization with gitStream AI and automations. That's where we are today. And we plan on doing that more. I'm not going to disclose on this pod then what we're doing next within the product of LinearB. But the hint that I will give is what we talked about in the beginning of the pod. We are going to bring more AI and automations that take work off of developers' plate and return them hours so they can work on the most important, creative, and interesting tasks. That's what's next for LinearB.
Wonderful. That sounds great. Dan, as always, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Ben.
Yeah. So make sure you subscribe to the Dev Interrupted newsletter for tons of awesome content that doesn't always make it into this main show. And if you're struggling to navigate the uncertainties of the AI-driven software development future, check out linearb.io to learn more about everything we discussed today. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.